would be pointed at a weakness, and this is an area where I think CLSA could maybe do some work to develop policies for folks to adopt. Similar to our contract, we have people available to us and professionals, and I think this would be a real member benefit because we understand that not everybody has time or money or access to the people that would be good at this, and this is a real good member benefit. For your $170, that policy would be well worth it and might protect you from a lawsuit in the future and also educate your staff. Going into the next thing, one man is essential. Do you think that you need a one-man? And this is where I come from personally as a firm is I am getting clients saying that, well, we want to run one-man crew on here. That's what we're used to paying for, and that's what we're used to. That's what our expectation is. And in my particular situation, I only run one-man crews. Very, very seldom would I field. I only run two-man crews, and very, very seldom would I run a one-man crew in the history of our work and in our company. And when I get pressure from a client that's saying, well, that's what I'm used to, you know, I understand that. Fortunately for us, we've been able to hold to this, but that's where we are. And then going to the next slide, you'll see there's a pretty much each end of the spectrum. There's not a lot in the middle on that particular chart showing it is. And going to the next slide. Now, I just want to run through this because I want to get into the topic, but I just want to make sure everybody sees what we polled, and if you have ideas of additional questions or polls, we can maybe modify our existing. And then we want to get a sense, are we talking to a lot of sole practitioners? Are we talking to a lot of big firms? So we want to get a sense in this question as to how many crews they field weekly so that we can see who is responding to this poll. The next few slides were made available to you. And one of the concerns we have is, as a surveyor, and I'm just going to briefly touch on my experience with this, is I still get out in the field, and it's changed a lot from what I recall 20 years ago, the distracted drivers. I see more people texting, maybe responding to emails, whatever they're doing in the car, than I did before, and it makes me maybe where I was 20 years ago. And so we all are aware that there is a distracted driver scenario that we didn't really deal with as much. The point was in the early days when we were doing this was always make eye contact with drivers. I'm not able to make eye contact with people, and it's one of those things I wanted to address in this. But Evan, would you go take it from here?
Yeah, as far as your pie charts, I think that they're pretty well reflective of most of the state. There may be a few more here at the north end of the state that are running one-man crews or small shops. And this rule proposal, first of all, there's a lot of concern of where it's coming from, why it's needed, and should the CLSA even back it up. And as you know, it was brought to legislative committee just a few months ago, and it was already well in process when CLSA was invited in. And at this point, it's pretty obvious it's going to pass. So we need to get in there and make sure that we help shape it to be something that the industry can live with, that covers these traffic situations, the construction situations, make sure people are safe, but doesn't put a burden on small businesses, those shops that most of their work is work that can be done with one person without any safety concerns. And that's kind of where we're at now. And the purpose of this webinar is largely to get some discussion going, because we do have representatives. Dave and I are each a representative on this committee that the Department of Industrial Relations have put together now. and we would like as much input as possible so that we are representing CLSA as a whole. We've got a wide cross-section of people, from solo operators to people who run several dozen people out of their survey department in just a particular office. This isn't really a public sector versus private sector issue. To my knowledge, it came out of the private sector. And so now we're just moving forward trying to get something workable.
Evan, could you address some of the concerns? We went to the meeting. Now, these meetings are public meetings, and so anybody's able to attend them. But could you address some of the concerns that have been asked of you? Namely sole practitioners. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like the sole practitioners.
Okay, the concerns from the sole practitioners. Yeah, they're a lot of them are upset because they don't understand what this is going to entail, why it's necessary, and how it's going to affect them. Sole practitioners are essentially not going to be affected. They'll have the same limitations as to the kinds of jobs that they can do now. I mean, they're already doing jobs that one person can do. And being through the Department of Industrial Relations rules, especially CLSA, that's directed towards the safety of employees. So they're already categorically exempt. And Dave, I think you said you got the reference on that. So if anybody wants that, perhaps they can email in later, or we can get it to them a little bit later in this program. But as far as a sole practitioner having to hire somebody when they've chosen to work by themselves, that's not really going to happen. For smaller businesses, and with our statewide poll, you guys down in Orange County did an excellent poll for that, but I would also like to see a little expansion on that to get the size of the organization in there as well. Because a lot of small shops, there might be the owner, might be somebody answering phones, might be a draftsman who's also a part-time chainman. And the way this juggles around, having to hire an extra person is a really big burden on these small companies. And they're already doing a lot of work that can be done with one person. And so CLSA is involved, I'm involved, to make sure that those projects that can be done with one person safely don't get swept up into this. There's a lot of speculation about this, where this came from, that it's a union proposal, and as far as I know, that's where it started at, and I won't speculate on the motivations. There's plenty of that going around, but hearing the arguments, some of them that Dave, you mentioned about clients pressuring companies to send out one-man crews where it's not really advisable, unsafe conditions and such. I think that there are some valid concerns out there. Whether or not it needs to be addressed by a government mandate through a administrative rule is wide open to argument, except for those arguing against it are going to lose it, because it's going to happen. Whether we're involved or not, it's going to happen.
And
Dave, Evan, yeah. I'm sorry to interject here, but we've got a question from the audience that I want to pose to both of you. The question is, at this time, is this only being reviewed for the land surveying field only, or is this also being reviewed for companies that offer GIS services, soils engineering, etc.?
This is, right now, it's tied to work done pursuant to 8726 of the Professional Land Surveyors Act. I did bring up, what about grade hops? What about, some other related trades and professions that work under the similar conditions? And essentially that got a near panic response of, oh my God, we don't want to open up more regulations. So at this time, it is just surveyors. To my understanding, there are other safety related regulations for other industries, specific to other industries, but as far as I know, the two-man crew we're the first and only at this point, but I don't know if that'll remain that way.
One of the things that came up in the language session, because they had a big screen with the language in a room full of people, and it was really a roll up your sleeves, let's talk about this and let's shape some language. And it come up in discussion that we need to write in some exemptions within the language, and that was the approach that initially we started on. And they told us that they don't want to write exemptions specifically because the public tends to think they fit those exemptions. And so they say if you put any exemption in there, everybody kind of claims that's their exemption. So they were going the other way and saying, well, when working in streets, when working on a active construction site. And then the question was, what's active? And then they went into when heavy equipment is in the proximity. And so that's how it was taking shape. Now that language that was discussed in the meeting hasn't been redistributed. But Evan, could you tell them a little more of your recollection of where they are? And then we can open up to questions. I want to make sure everybody knows where we are in the process, and then we can take questions.
Right. That's, yeah, we did start by going down trying to identify, well, where can they use one-man crew? And the point was made, well, when we do that, then we open it up to this laundry list that gets constantly added to, and it gets very unmanageable. And it's easier, as Dave said, to define the basic circumstances under which we want to say this is where a two-man crew is required. And then if your work doesn't fall within those 2 or 3 specific categories, then you should be okay. And that's where we had left it. The only surveyors that are in the room is one of the union guys used to be a surveyor before he was with the union, and then there's 3 of us from CLSA. And it's a good thing we're there because a lot of the industrial safety types are thinking the second person is some kind of a field safety officer. And we had to kind of straighten them out and say, no, this person is a productive employee. And when you've got 2 or more people on a crew, it's each crew member is looking out for the other, as we normally do, just common sense. You know, we've got people out there, whether you've got 2, 3 people, 1 person, everybody's looking out for themselves and everybody else out on the site. So a lot of it is, and this is a point that was made, I think somewhere on the forum somebody had made, that training your employee, keep an eye out for safety, whether you send out 1, 2, 3 or more crew, or people on a crew, is probably more important than this mandate.
Yeah, and
these are the types of things we're trying to introduce. And so, Dave, I think you kind of summed it up pretty good, is the language is still somewhat in flux, but we're more settled on going the direction of identifying the 2 or 3 categories where they want to see a 2-man crew all the time.
yeah, and I would like to add, because there's certainly going to be pros and cons in this system. And I'll tell you, one of the pro things for me is if we had a 2-man crew mandate, it sets the playing field level, because the people that request this they'll see a two-man crew rate at, let's just say $250 an hour, and then they see a one-man crew rate at $170 an hour, and it doesn't matter the efficiencies realized or gained or not by that. They want the lower hourly rate, even on fixed fee contracts. They like to, in a mandate situation, then everybody's back to an equal playing field, and it doesn't put pressure on an owner to maybe push a limit to field a one man, and maybe when the mandate's there, everybody's back to equal. That's one of the things I personally would lean me towards the mandate. I have also fielded a lot of calls the other way. I recently had a surveyor call me, and he says, if I have two guys in the street, we're not standing by each other. He's out putting out a backside, I'm putting out a backside. So statistically, my chances of somebody getting run over are doubled because I have two people in the street as opposed to one. And there's a lot of points to this. And the important thing is CLSA is at the table. CLSA is able to talk about this, but we need to hear from the members. And the proper thing is the members need to write to their chapter directors or to the executive committee, which would be the president of CLSA, and we need to know what your direction is, because as directors, we need to hear from the membership on this, because Evan practices in Northern California, I'm in Southern California. Our business models are different, our clientele is different, and we need everybody's input. And you get a lot of bang for your buck for your membership on this, and we need to hear from you one way or another so that we are representing your interests. Like Evan said, this is going to go through in some shape or form, but if we can say with a poll, this is where our membership is and this is where they are, how I feel about it as an individual or how Evan feels about it is really we're governed by the numbers. If you're not a member of CLSA and you call me, we're just talking survey at that point. I want to hear from the members because this is what you're paying for. So Evan, Jeff, does anybody have anything to add to that?
Dave, I think this question is pertinent. It's a question that we hear and we read on the forums, and we get emailed to us. The honest business tries every day to navigate all the laws, sees those who cuts corners or flagrantly breaks the law with no punishment. This seems like just another hurdle for the honest business person. Will there be sufficient monitoring to make this applicable to everyone so we don't drive the honest people out of business?
Well, that's like they say, locks on the door only keep honest people out. And this is probably true, but it would be nice if in the event that there was a mandate, then that would be written into the public contracts for sure, in the contracting code. And that would set people to being equal, honest firms. There would be no advantage to running a one-man crew. And currently, there's really no advantage to running a two-man crew from a business aspect, because I'll give you an example is our cost is not recuperated. If we're running let's just make up numbers, we're running a $180 one-man crew, and we're running a $250 two-man crew on a public works project, that $70 is my prevailing wage difference. And so there's nothing gained by having that second guy on the crew financially. So, but if it was mandated, that would be ideal in a public works situation so that we're set equal among the honest firms. And not that a one-man firm is dishonest, I'm saying set equal competitively. That's one of the advantages.
Dave and Evan, what about technology options? Firms have their IPP plans, and they might have phone check-ins, or somebody posed the question, even using dash cams or Skype or something that you could be in touch with somebody in the field via a technology solution, one that we may not even might be an emerging technology. Any thought to that in the committee proceedings?
It did come up. I'm sorry to cut you off, Evan. One of the things that came up is the guy says, well, does this person have to be a classified employee, for example, a chainman? Why couldn't we use the SPOT program or the spotters where you could have somebody that isn't actually a surveyor but a traffic control guy that you maybe pay a labor rate to or something similar to that? You want to add to that, Evan?
Yeah, there's that, but also with the technology part of it, if you're working in a traffic situation or on a construction site, you're generally parking your vehicle somewhere where it's somewhat convenient but out of the way, and a dash cam's not going to do much good. I think a lot of the purpose of the second person being there as much or more than just looking out for each other is that if one person gets hurt and say is unconscious, then you've got another worker there who can contact help. As far as the remote sites, it was kicked around a little bit in a committee, and there was somebody had posted links on the forum to a couple of satellite communications, like those little pucks or a little device that a crew member would carry with them. And I looked into these somewhat, and some of them are kind of amazing. I mean, some of them have like motion detectors, so if you stop moving, then it sends off an alarm. Some of them have heartbeat monitors, so your heart stops beating or beats erratically, it sends off an alarm. They have pre-programmed in messages. You know, it's 11:30 in the morning and everything's okay, bam. That goes to the office, and so they know, okay, we don't have to worry about this crew or this person out there. So there are some technology things that could fit into this. Also, kind of speaking along with technology, but backing up a little bit, there was some points made that, you know, we've invested all this money with robotic stations, GPS, whatnot, so that we can go out and do one-person work and be more efficient that way. The industry has come up with these solutions to make us more efficient, and we should do that. And yes, there's a time and a place for it, and that's why we want to have, you know, interject into this rule so that we are able to preserve that time and place. And I also think that you're probably going to get a lot of pushback on the level playing field concept. And I don't see this rule as being a business rule, and I don't think that it should be looked at that way, because then it simply looks protectionist of business rather than employee safety. I think that
I'm just trying to soften it. I've been trying to soften it, paint a pretty picture.
Yeah, I understand, and there's, you know, there will be that side benefit, but I think that the primary focus on it should be that there are situations where, for safety reasons, having more than one person on the crew is not only a benefit, but in some situations is necessary for safety reasons.
Well, and from a safety perspective, one of the concerns that I would have is I was trained in traffic safety like most everybody, and I was trained to recognize unsafe situations and so on and so forth. And when you're out there as a one person, you're not bringing that next, what would be one-man crew up, you know, apprenticing them into a safe situation. And what happens is there's a tendency in all these situations for complacency, where the second guy on the crew kind of can keep an eye on each other and make sure you don't step out in front of traffic. I had a party chief when I was a chainman, grab my shirt. I'm not focusing on what I should be focusing on. And so I think that's a problem. I think I've worked as a one-man crew by myself, and there's a fatigue factor in that when you're hauling this stuff out yourself and doing it as the day goes on, whether you're staking or do whatever you're doing, as you fatigue, you are less aware. And so that comes in when you talk about a safety issue. What I worry about is the employees that maybe don't recognize that, and they feel the demand to compromise their safety, or the worst case scenario is they don't recognize they're compromising their safety. I feel much less, and we get somebody out there, those are real safety concerns. And what kind of training do they have? I regularly see, semi-regularly see folks out there with mesh vest and tennis shoes and these kind of things, and on busy streets. This is in Orange County, and I think who put these guys out here without, they might have a little one cone situation, and that's something that I won't say this law would fix, but it would sure stiffen up penalties if something were to happen to them. What do you say to that, Evan?
Well, I think that there is obviously a benefit, and in different contexts. I'm a proponent for more than 2 men on a crew. I'd love to have 3 men on a crew just for that training purpose, but that's just not economically feasible anymore. And a lot of businesses are kind of built around this one-man crew operation, and I can understand that because of both the technology and the just the costs of having to employ somebody. But as far as a person being careful, more or less careful when they're on their own, I think that's going to be a lot very personality driven. Some people are just feel invincible, and others realize that, hey, there's nobody looking out for me. And I've heard the point made that when I'm out there working by myself, I'm extra careful. I'm more aware of what's around me because it all depends on me seeing it. And I think that part is going to be personality driven. But the training part, I agree with you there. That's going to be missing. Some people are going to be come straight out of school or come straight out of wherever it is they're going to come from now to be entry level. An entry level is essentially going to be the guy running the instrument if it's a one-person crew.
Yeah.
Where does that person get the training? Where does that not only the safety training, but the technical training for that matter?
For that matter, because we can't be apprenticed. We pretty much refuse education as a whole, as a requirement historically, as a pathway. I mean, we accept as surveyor's education, but we lean more towards, well, we're also apprenticed. When we look at like a 4-year degree, well, if you're running a one-man crew, and we agree that it's essentially field work and capacity is important to becoming the pathway to a licensed land surveyor, are we closing off a pathway? That's a consideration when we look at the broader things associated with the practice. And I agree that this is a safety issue, but we also know that business needs or business demands, we don't want to compromise safety for that. But I'm feeling pressure in the business place to run one-man crews, and I'm fortunately enough that I have the right clients that I don't have to do that. But I understand that somebody might be able to, and I'll take it back to 1991 when we had that recession. Essentially, we were running a lot of 3-man crews at that point, occasional 2-man crews, but it was mostly 3-man. The recession went, and we never ran 3-man crews as an industry standard after that 91 recession. It was always 2-man. And I remember in the mid-90s, people were lamenting, oh, it's so much easier when we have 3 guys, one guy to carry this, one guy to carry that. We get into 96, 97, 98. This is when I was dealing with my first RTK unit, my first fully really a functional robotics total station. We had the same capacity to and we weren't talking about one-man crews at that time. We still ran two-man crews or two-person crews with the same technology. And I didn't see a lot of one-man crews like I feel I see today in 2006, 2007. We hit a recession, not unlike in 91, and now all of a sudden two-man crew is everywhere. I mean, one-man crew. And again, what was different from 96 to 2006, I had the same equipment. We weren't talking about one-man crews. We had some sole proprietors who were doing it very well, but essentially the market was still two-man. If we, from a business consideration, this is why the safety comes in place. The market is going to demand one-man crews, and we can all agree that that isn't always appropriate, and will everybody understand that? So that, I mean, it's a broader issue, and that this kind of a mandate coming through would help us in some ways professionally, and it would also help us as a business, but it would also put another mandate on, like Jeff was mentioning earlier. Government is in our backyard, which I read a number of people who are really concerned about that. So there's a lot to this issue, and again, we need CLSA members, dues-paying members, state-paying dues-paying members to weigh in on this, and we need to hear from them, either through the executive committee, through your chapter, by contacting your directors, or you contact the state executive committee, or you contact the state legislative committee, and we need to get this poll out. Now, central office has agreed to re-administer the Orange County poll statewide. We need the folks out there to respond to it so that we have real data when we talk about this.
Now, Dave, before we get to the next question, folks, I do want to remind you that if you click the raise your hand function in your dashboard, I'd be glad to unmute you and allow you to interact in the webinar, ask your question verbally. I don't see any hands raised yet, so I'll pose a question that was submitted through the question box. What about 6731.1 of the PE Act?
Which section?
6731.1.
Okay, 6731 of the PE Act is essentially the same as 8726A and B, where engineers can do topographic surveying and construction staking. So that would be incentive to become an engineer, because it is very specific to land surveying 8726, and the language I saw didn't include 6731.1, and it should quite appropriately.
Yes.
Okay. That is an excellent suggestion that didn't occur to me. And Jeff, you're there in front of a computer. I would like you to make a note of that and send it to the legislative committee, because we have a meeting on June 11th, and we need to make sure that gets in there.
Okay, good to know. I'm going to unmute William Marshall and see. Let's see. William, you've got to enter your audio pin, which you have not done yet. So let me see. Has anybody else raised their hand? No other. You might want to enter your audio pin, William, and then we can unmute you and you can participate. Let's see if there's any other questions here in our question box. Why not promote use of flaggers? Only need to be trained in looking out for traffic, with only a one-person crew trained as a surveyor. I know we've talked a little bit about that. You want to respond to that one again, or move on to another one?
No, this is Dave Woolley. That came up in our meeting, and in the meeting, using spotters and so on and so forth. I think it's hard to argue against that. But I don't know what the readily available somebody is. If I had a survey to do on a Thursday, how I can pick up somebody for a day's work essentially and know what I'm getting and put them back. You know, it's a viability and availability.
Okay, and William, I think you're unmuted now, and I believe that was your question. Did you want to follow up on that, or are you comfortable with the answer? William Marshall?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Trying to navigate this thing, I missed it.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been doing surveying as an assistant or as a professional surveyor for only about 35 years. But I always believe strongly in safety, but my concern when I read the introduction to the original webinar is if a guy is using GPS to mark out things in an ag field for somebody to build a house, you don't need a two-man crew.
That's right.
You know, I don't think you're going to find an argument on that. But how do you write an exemption for a house in an ag field that, you know, I mean, that make suggestions on the language. But keep in mind when we make suggestions, they don't want to say this is exempt. You have to write it in the positive. And I'm not expecting you to write it in full or have an idea, but keep that in mind. And just even if it's just an idea, send us an email, and we have people that can come up with language. But you're not going to get any disagreement. That came up time and again, where it's not a vacant lot. Somebody says, I'm doing a vacant lot with the instrument in the middle of it. I don't need two people to run a 50-foot grid or a 25-foot grid. How do you exclude that? And that's what Evan was instrumental in that.
Yeah, there's, William, where they left off with that, we started trying to identify exemptions and kind of found that unmanageable. And where they're going with it is to instead identify the situations where a two-man crew is needed. And so assuming we get this thing written right and CLSA gets their input definitely heard, which we have so far, then something like your example where you're out in an ag field or a vacant lot or something staking out a house, that's going to be totally unaffected by this. But that's why we're involved, to make sure that that remains unaffected by this proposal.
Dave and Evan, was any data submitted about you know, injuries or anything that kind of backed up this mandate?
No. Oh, the only
question come up a lot, and nobody had anything like that. I would like to see it. A lot of us would like to see it if it's there. But I think the union guys said that they were going to try to put some kind of information based on what they have in their records. But I haven't seen any widespread data on that.
Yeah, and if anybody that's on the phone call that's going to be Local 3 and Local 12 are the union. So if you're signatory, reach out to your business agent and kind of push this along for that data, or if you guys know something. And I think maybe we can wrap that into our poll. The only real data available was what the Orange County chapter provided through their polling, 18 months ago. As a practice-based chapter, these are the kind of issues we're focusing on to get this data. But what's interesting is we did our poll, but it wasn't part of their official package, right, Evan? I mean, this is our data. I think if we can bring data in with real numbers of our membership, I think that would be, it allows the industry to be, like Evan said, we're the only surveyors in the room. And that would allow us to have a voice or a seat at the table in doing this. The Local 3 and Local 12 had representatives there, and so I guess we weren't the only surveyors because they represent the signatory firms. But practicing surveyors, that was Evan and I, and Alex Calder from San Francisco. So
question, Dave, sorry to cut you off, but we're getting tight on time. I want to get these questions in.
Right.
Has Whopper and OSHA already require two-man crews on certain site conditions? Why do we need to over-regulate what is already in place? And this goes to what you were talking about, Dave, with writing exemptions. It sounds like there's certain conditions that already have these mandates through other regulatory bodies and statutes.
Well, and what I would suggest is whoever has that, send an email to central office with that has Whopper provision or whatever they have, so that's consideration, so that we can present that at one of these meetings. And again, I want CLSA will take a role in making a public notice that, hey, this is coming up, because if there's a member who has something to contribute, I want to encourage anybody to attend these meetings, because if this doesn't go well, Evan and I are going to take heat for it no matter what we did. So please come on down. Another thing is this is moving to a national level. I've been contacted by some of the national figures, particularly Gary Kent, and the folks at NSPS are starting to take a notice of this. And NSPS on a national level, they're involved in a lot of different issues. I received a memo yesterday. It'll be coming out in the Orange County newsletter concerning Davis-Bacon prevailing wage issues. So the NSPS national thing, I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think it would be good to have CLSA State be able to provide real data with our polling. It makes us look good, even though we're not members of the CLSA or the NSPS contingency yet. I think we could still take a lead role in that. So if you watch NSPS also, and Gary Kent, because Gary Kent has contacted me a few times about our polling. He wanted to know particulars about the questions, and it's going to move to a much broader issue. And you know what they say is, what California does, so goes the nation. And so I want the members to get involved and answer this poll when it comes out. Jeff's working on the polling now. The Orange County chapter provided our Survey Monkey sheet that gets tabulated. I want members to answer these polls, please. And if you're not a member, get your check in, because you're getting a lot of bang for your buck on this. And we need the state members to weigh in on this. We're getting involved. More recently, there seems to be an uptick in regulations, which this is a regulation. We're seeing regulations proposed through the board rules, and the CLSA really has an active role in this, and we need people involved.
Yeah, Dave, you're periodically cutting out a little bit here and there, but just to kind of reiterate your basic message there, yeah, we need input, and the CLSA is looking at a lot of these different things. Like you said, there's a lot of regulation coming through right now, and just with LegCom the last year, we've been kind of scrambling in several different directions, looking at different proposals that come through, and it's hard to catch them all, but we try. And you know, for a volunteer organization, I think we're doing fairly well. But of course, the more volunteers we have, the better job we can do.
If you can't volunteer, right, send your membership in, because people have to go to Sacramento to attend these meetings. They give us their time, but the state usually will pick up their airfare. So if you can't be a volunteer, send in your money. You're getting something for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Folks, it's 5 minutes to the hour. I've got Mr. Chaudhry. I'm going to unmute Mr. Chaudhry or Mrs. Chaudhry. I'm not sure. Can you ask your question, please? Sudhir, I've unmuted you. Do you have a question? I'll leave it unmuted. We'll just go through. There's just a couple minutes left. The overriding theme of the questions that are coming through in the question box is, this seems like it's a solution to a problem that hasn't been defined. And you all have been talking about that, Evan and Dave. Seems like there's a desire to see a little bit more data that backs up this supposed problem. Any feedback here from Chandri? I've got you live. Barbara Delamar, welcome. You are unmuted. Would you like to pose a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. We can.
Okay, I'm looking at the operating engineer's Local 3 draft proposal, and then I'm looking at the proposed state standard. They're very different.
Yeah,
So
neither one of those are the current, but we're closer to the state one than to the OE3 one. At the legislative committee, when we saw OE3 proposal, we were pretty much all in agreement that that was just not workable.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear.
When the DIR proposal came out, we said, okay, this is much closer, but we knew there was going to be negotiations involved, so let's get involved. And
that's what I want to make sure that the proposed state standard supersedes the operating engineer.
Neither one of those are current at the moment.
Okay.
And we haven't been sent, they're slow in sending out the current language where we're at, but it's quite a ways away from the OE3 language.
Right.
In fact, I would even go so far as to say I don't recall any of that OE3 language in the last draft that we saw on the screen. Do you, Evan? It didn't seem to get any traction at all. It took a whole different direction, and it took the state language, refined it, and then the last version we saw, it had some bullet points that said, you know, the street situation in heavy construction defined as when heavy equipment is present, and then that's how it was going. It didn't look anything like OE3. Can you confirm that with me, Evan?
Yeah, that's what I remember, because the OE3 language pretty much was two-man crew minimum all the time, everywhere, no matter what, and that just wasn't going to go anywhere.
Great.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say is this issue, how you're mixing up the training of the next generation with the safety issue. They should be separate.
I agree with that, Barbara.
Because you're not paying attention when you're training somebody, and so that causes other safety issues. I just don't want to mix those two up.
Right.
You're not alone on that, Barbara. That has come up repeatedly, and Evan is you're a good advocate for that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You know, we've been around since '57. We've been through the '80 recession. Our recession was '94, not '91, and then now this last one. You know, we ran those two-man crews, those three-man crews, then went down to two-man because of the recession. Now we've been doing the one-man crew, of course, and we're a small firm now, you know, 5 people. So the safety issue is in the job description, and I am concerned with safety, but adding another person I don't think is going to help some of these issues and some of these accidents that were written up in this presentation here.
Yeah, and you know, Barbara, you bring up a good point that I'm glad I didn't miss this. You know, I have relationships with several sole proprietor, you know, one-man firms, good relationships, and our firm is like 19 people deep right now, and so we practically at cost to these firms so that they're readily available. And so some of the smaller firms, I would encourage them to partner with friendly businesses that are willing to help each other out, particularly the non-signatory firms that in theory couldn't call the hall and get somebody out. Form some relationships, and then you don't have the burden of keeping somebody busy 40 hours a week, or, you know, because you need them for a day. We understand that. I understand that anyway. And so form relationships. I have actually 3 different companies that we supply staff to for a day, for half a day, kind of help them out because I understand that situation. I was there myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 12 o'clock. Oh, I see Sherry Barnes has raised a hand. We'll take this one last question. We're going over a little bit. Sherry, you have a question, please. You are unmuted, Sherry. Question, the hand has come down. Okay. Well, folks, I failed to introduce myself earlier. Apologize for that. This has been Jeff Burgess, your Executive Director here at the Central Office of CLSA. I want to thank Dave Woolley and Evan Page, our presenters, who provided this information today, who represent you and all surveyors in this Department of Industrial Relations Technical Advisory Committee. Our CLSA Legislative Committee is meeting this weekend to reconsider this issue, as well as a great number of other issues that have come up in this most recent legislative session, as well as in regulatory arenas like the Department of Industrial Relations. So stay tuned. We will stay in touch with you. We will keep you apprised of this issue as well as others. And as Dave mentioned, and as you can see on your screen now, the CLSA website provides additional information, and as always, a way for you to get caught up on your dues. If you have not already done so for 2016, just join or renew right there on the page at californiasurveyors.org. So thanks again, everybody, for participating. We appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Jeff.